You've seen the viral posts, maps from the 1500s showing Antarctica without ice, Turkish admirals charting coastlines 3 centuries before official discovery, Phoenician nobles finding islands that sailors searched for and never saw, lost civilizations, ancient technology, secret knowledge suppressed by mainstream historians. But here's the thing, nobody wants to tell you. When you actually look at the documents, pull the scholarly analysis, read what the mapmakers themselves wrote on these charts, the story gets way more interesting than ancient aliens or suppressed history. Because what you're looking at isn't impossible knowledge. It's something far stranger. It's the moment when European cartography stopped being about what people knew and started being about what they wanted to believe. Istanbul. An Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis takes gazelle skin parchment and draws the Western Atlantic. Born around 1465 in Gallipoli, Piri sailed with his uncle Kemal Reis, famous Ottoman naval commander. He learned navigation in the Mediterranean, fought in naval battles, captured Spanish vessels. One of those captures in 1501 changed cartography. A Spanish prisoner who sailed with Columbus, 3 voyages. The man had maps, documents, knowledge of the New World coastlines. The fragment that remains today measures 87 by 63 centimeters. Discovered in 1929 in the Topkapi Palace basement by German theologian Gustav Deismann, director Halil Edhem was cataloging Ottoman manuscripts, found it rolled with other documents. And down at the bottom, there's a coastline. It extends south from Brazil. It curves. It has mountains marked inland, rivers flowing to coast. And for 70 years, people have been saying, this is Antarctica. Ice-free Antarctica, mapped when it shouldn't have been. They theorized an ice-free Antarctica before 4000 BC. They proposed ancient seafaring civilizations with advanced cartographic technology. The US Air Force cartographic section wrote letters supporting the hypothesis. Best-selling authors picked it up, Graham Hancock, Eric von Daniken. It became proof of lost Atlantean knowledge, evidence of ancient astronauts, the map that broke history. The academic consensus is clear, and it's been clear since proper scholarly analysis began in the 1930s. That southern landmass is Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land. Ptolemy proposed it at the 2nd century AD in his Geographia. 8 books, systematic geography. He believed massive northern continents needed a southern counterbalance or the Earth would tip, equilibrium, balance. The concept dominated geographic thinking for over 1,000 years, reaching from below South America all the way to New Guinea. Jodocus Hondius includes it in 1630, Petrus Plancius in 1590. They all show variations of the same theoretical continent, sometimes touching South America at Tierra del Fuego, sometimes separate, sometimes with detailed coastlines, sometimes vague outlines. But the mapmakers wrote that speculation right on the charts. Terra Australis non incognita. Southern land not yet known, conjectured, suspected, not based on exploration, based on cosmological theory. To fit the parchment edge, Brazilian place names appear on what's supposedly Antarctica. The outline matches Patagonia and the Falklands, not any version of Antarctica with or without ice. Hapgood's 1949 seismic survey covered less than 1% of the area shown on the map. Modern ice, penetrating radar and satellite mapping shows zero correlation between Piri Reis and actual subglacial topography. And there's an even bigger problem. Antarctica was last ice-free over 14 million years ago. Not 6,000, not 10,000, 14 million. Long before anything resembling human civilization. Ice core data from the Antarctic ice sheet itself proves continuous glaciation through the entire span of human history. If someone mapped Antarctica ice-free, they did it before the earliest hominids walked upright. The hypothesis doesn't just require ancient advanced civilizations, it requires them to exist millions of years before humans. Press in December 2003, the scholarly analysis from the Imago Mundi Journal article by Gregory McIntosh examining primary Ottoman sources published in 2000, and the detailed archaeological rebuttal published in the Journal of the History of Cartography, analyzing the Hapgood claims in 2005. Now back to the information. His notes describe compiling recent charts. The Portuguese maps he used came from voyages in the 1500s. The Columbus map dated to 1498, nothing older. The technique is visible. Portuguese cartographers in this period drew Brazil's coast wrapping southeast to fit their projection style. Piri copied that style. The result looks like it might be another landmass. It's actually just Brazil drawn long. But Piri wasn't trying to deceive anyone. He was trying to synthesize the best available contemporary information into one coherent chart. But it doesn't need ancient civilizations to explain it. It needs skilled Ottoman cartographers with access to the latest European and Arabic geographic knowledge, which is exactly what Piri Reis was. And for decades it's been called proof of Antarctic knowledge. The proportions allegedly match. The Ross Sea appears as an unnamed gulf. Coastal features line up with 1957 geophysical surveys. Hapgood used this map alongside Piri Reis as evidence for his ancient source theory. It was printed in a book in 1531 and thus couldn't be amended later. It shows Antarctica too close to South America, rotated incorrectly. But the general shape seems familiar. Mountains where modern surveys found ranges, bays where coastline curves. It's specific enough to be eerie. He never claimed to base his Antarctic depiction on actual surveys. He drew what logic suggested should exist, a southern continent balancing the north. He filled in details the same way medieval mapmakers drew dragons and cities in unexplored regions. Educated guesswork shaped by geographic theory. When you compare the Phineas map to actual subglacial topography, the matches disappear. Wilkes Land, which Phineas shows as solid coast, is actually two subsea basins with scattered bedrock islands. The Ross Sea shape differs significantly from his unnamed gulf. The interior mountain ranges don't align with real Antarctic topography. The coastal outline fails to account for ice shelves that have existed for millennia. If Phineas based his map on ancient sources showing ice-free Antarctica, those sources would need to be over 14 million years old. The geological record is unambiguous. Antarctica has been fully glaciated throughout human existence. Paleoclimatic studies, sediment cores, ice layer analysis. Every data source confirms continuous ice cover during the entire period when any advanced civilization could have existed. The Phineas map isn't evidence of ancient Antarctic cartography. It's evidence of 16th century European cosmology, the belief that the world needed to be balanced, that unknown lands must exist to match known ones. Phineas drew what he believed had to be there, and he happened to be right that something existed at the South Pole, but he had no idea what it actually looked like. French geographer Philippe Buache presents a map to the Royal Academy of Sciences in Paris, often dated to 1737, but the map itself reads September 3rd, 1739. It's based on Jean-Baptiste Charles Bouvet de Lozier's voyage south of the Cape of Good Hope in 1738. The map shows two southern continents separated by a polar sea. A strait connects this internal sea to the Ross and Weddell Seas. The outline allegedly matches Antarctica's subglacial topography. Two land masses, a waterway between them, details that weren't confirmed until the International Geophysical Year in 1958. The proportions allegedly prove access to ancient charts made before glaciation. It's been called the most compelling evidence for prehistoric Antarctic mapping. The South Pole on Buache's map sits in the middle of the polar sea. The actual South Pole sits on bedrock highlands in East Antarctica, nowhere near any channel. Large bedrock islands interrupt what Buache shows as open water. The proportions are wrong, the orientation is wrong, the features simply don't exist. Right there on the regions he's drawing, he includes notes about Bouvet's expedition. Those notes mention icebergs, massive icebergs, 200 to 300 feet high, half a league to 3 leagues in circumference. Buache explicitly describes ice. He's not depicting ice-free conditions. He's drawing theoretical geography based on iceberg reports and incomplete voyage data. His map represents 1830 French efforts to understand southern waters, not ancient Antarctic surveys. Others say it's Buache's revised hypothesis. The map in the Library of Congress has never been examined thoroughly enough to confirm which. Without that examination, we can't even be certain the Antarctic version is genuinely from Buache or from 1739. He predicted Alaska and the Bering Strait decades before official confirmation. He was right about some things and completely wrong about others. His Antarctic map shows the process of geographic discovery, speculation, hypothesis, revision, not ancient knowledge, scientific method in its early stages. The title translates as On the Discovery of the Islands of Freeland, Islanda, Engronland, Estotland, and Icaria, made under the Arctic Pole by two Zeno brothers. The author is Niccolo Zeno the Younger. He claims to have found letters in his family archives. Letters written by his ancestors Niccolo and Antonio Zeno in the 1380s and 1390s. The letters describe voyages to northern Atlantic islands, Freiland, a substantial rectangular landmass south of Iceland, detailed coastlines, towns with Italian names like Ferlanda and Sorand. The younger Zeno publishes a map with the book. The Zeno brothers allegedly sailed there under a prince named Zichmni. They explored Greenland. They found a monastery with central heating. They discovered lands across the Atlantic a century before Columbus. Freiland appears on virtually every major map of the North Atlantic from 1560 through 1660. Martin Frobisher confused Greenland with Friesland in 1576, looking for the Northwest Passage. Queen Elizabeth's advisor, John Dee, claimed Friesland for England in 1580. Sailors reported spotting it. Expeditions searched for it. For 100 years, Friesland was cartographic fact. Niccolo Zeno the Younger invented it. Born around 1515 to 1520, member of the Council of Ten in Venice, respected mathematician, geographer. The scholarly consensus is unambiguous. The letters are fabrications. The map is a hoax. Frederick W. Lucas published a detailed demolition in 1898. The annals of the voyages of the brothers Niccolo and Antonio Zeno in the North Atlantic. Lucas was British geographer. Meticulous researcher, he traced how Zeno the Younger used contemporary maps from the 1500s and scattered their features across the North Atlantic, not exploring the Arctic. In Venice, serving the Republic. Antonio Zeno, also real, also died in Venice around 1403. Neither brother left voyage accounts describing northern islands. No contemporary sources mention their alleged Arctic expeditions. Nothing until their descendant published in 1558. Portuguese and Venetian charts provide the geographic elements. Cartographers believe Zeno took Olaus Magnus's 1539 Carta Marina, showing Scandinavia, took Benedetto Bordoni's 1528 Isolario, depicting North Atlantic islands, combined elements, scattered them across empty ocean, created Freiland from fragments of Iceland and Faroes, invented place names that sound Italian, Forlanda, Sorand. The narrative reads like bad fiction. The boy Niccolo claims he found family letters and tore them to shreds because he didn't understand their importance. Later, as an adult, he tries to reconstruct them. Classic false provenance story. Every historical hoax needs origin story explaining why original evidence is conveniently destroyed. Zeno the Younger wanted to claim New World discovery for Venice. He fabricated a pre-Columbian Venetian voyage. He dated it to the 1380s, a century earlier. He promoted his family name and Venetian a priority in one stroke. The hoax worked spectacularly. For 150 years, Freiland stayed on maps, even after sailors repeatedly failed to find it, even after navigation improved and the waters were proven empty. Cartographers kept including it because authoritative earlier maps showed it. The Zeno map had entered the cartographic canon. A few stubborn cartographers keep it into the 1770s. But the age of careful navigation killed phantom islands. You can only claim an island exists for so long before someone proves the ocean there is empty. How prestigious families could manipulate history for political purposes. It's a perfect case study in the creation and persistence of historical myths. Mercator, meaning merchant, built globes starting 1536. Instruments of extraordinary precision. Arrested in 1544, accused of heresy. 30-year-old Protestant sympathizer during Catholic crackdown. Imprisoned 42 days. Released through intervention of University of Louvain. Moved to Duisburg in 1552. Worked on revolutionary projection system. Septentrionalium Terrarum Descriptio. Description of northern lands. The first standalone map of the Arctic. Before this, Arctic appeared only as insets on larger world maps. Mercator's own 1569 world map had small Arctic inset in lower left corner. That projection infinitely expands polar regions, makes them unusable. This standalone map solves that problem, shows the Arctic and polar projection, clear, detailed. At the center sits a black rock, Rupes nigra et altissima, black and very high rock, 33 leagues in circumference, surrounded by a great whirlpool, indrawing seas. 4 powerful rivers feed it. These rivers divide the Arctic into 4 distinct islands, each island different character. Depicts California remarkably far north. Above the Arctic Circle on western edge. This reflects incomplete knowledge of Pacific coastline. Spanish heard of California but hadn't mapped it accurately. It includes regions labeled Gog and Magog from biblical prophecy. Ezekiel 38, Revelation 20. Nations that will rise against God in end times. Medieval cosmography put them somewhere far north. This map gets cited as evidence for ancient Arctic knowledge. The 4 islands supposedly represent a time before ice covered the pole. The river system allegedly shows lost maritime routes. Some claim it depicts the mythical Hyperborea. The Greeks believed in a northern land where the sun never set, where an advanced civilization thrived. Mercator's map supposedly preserves that ancient geography. The Arctic features are pure mythology. Mercator's source was a lost text called Inventio Fortunata, a 14th century travelogue by an English friar. That text itself was fantasy. Medieval travelers loved writing impossible journey accounts. Cities of gold, kingdoms of plenty, bizarre geography. The Inventio Fortunata described the Arctic polar islands and the magnetic rock. Mercator believed it. He incorporated it into his map. He built his Arctic cartography on fiction, not from exploration, not from ancient maps. It was wrong, but it was a serious attempt to account for observed magnetic phenomena. Part myth, it's not ancient knowledge. It's 16th century cosmography trying to make sense of incomplete information using the tools available. Religious texts, classical authors, contemporary voyage reports, logical deduction, and outright guessing. Mercator chose ocean, though for the wrong reasons. That happened to align with reality. But his 4 islands, his whirlpool, his magnetic mountain, all wrong. Proof that even getting the broad picture correct doesn't validate the details. 10 original copies survive in libraries across Europe and America. One sits in the Museum of Ethnography in Budapest. How it got there, nobody knows. Maybe István Gjörfi brought it from his 1919 Turkey expedition. Maybe scholar Tagan Kalimjan carried it back from Anatolia. It was inventoried in 1961 with no accompanying information. It depicts North and South American coasts with what enthusiasts call modern precision, and it shows the Bering Strait as dry land, a wide landmass connecting Asia and North America, 1559, the Bering Land Bridge during the Ice Age, Beringia, an area the size of Australia that allowed human migration from Siberia to Alaska. But Beringia submerged around 11,000 years ago when sea levels rose after glacial melt. How does a 1559 map show it? The apparent connection is the cartographer bending geography to fit the format. This happens on multiple maps from this period. Projections create visual illusions. Continents seem to touch when they're actually apart. 1559 cartographers had no framework for understanding glacial sea level changes or prehistoric land connections. They drew what contemporary voyages reported. The Haji Ahmad map is impressive for incorporating Portuguese, Spanish, and Ottoman geographic knowledge, for showing spherical projection techniques, for detailed American coastlines based on early exploration reports. But it's not depicting Ice Age geography. It's depicting contemporary geography with projection artifacts, all conclusively refuted. Ice core data, radiocarbon dating, submarine surveys, satellite mapping. Every scientific tool available confirms these maps show speculation, mythology, and hoaxes, not suppressed history. That Piri Reis coastline really does curve like Antarctica if you squint. The Orontius Phineus continent really does have a shape that seems familiar when you don't measure carefully. The Buache map really does show two landmasses with a waterway when you ignore the annotations, saying it's conjectured. We see what looks like a match, and confirmation bias takes over. We stop looking deeper. We ignore contradicting details. The coastline matches here. Doesn't matter that it fails there. The proportions seem right from this angle. Doesn't matter they're wrong from others. We found the pattern. We're satisfied. That mainstream historians suppress evidence creates an us versus them dynamic. That we're rediscovering lost knowledge makes us special, initiated, part of an enlightened minority who see truth others miss. It's intoxicating. Versus the boring academic answer. These are maps showing speculative geography based on Ptolemaic theory, contemporary coastlines with projection distortion, outright fabrications for political purposes. There's no mystery, just normal historical cartography with all its errors and oddities and human motivations. Never mind that scholars have published hundreds of detailed analyses explaining exactly what these maps show. Never mind the evidence is public and freely available. The narrative of suppression is more emotionally satisfying than the reality of normal academic disagreement about historical interpretation. How knowledge spread through trade networks, maritime competition, naval warfare, political alliances. How errors propagated when cartographers copied each other's work without independent verification. Nobody sailed to Fryland to check. They trusted Mercator. Mercator trusted Zeno. Error compounds. How hoaxes succeeded through exploitation of trust networks. How speculation shaped exploration. Cook sailed south looking for Terra Australis. Found nothing. Disproved its existence in those latitudes. Exploration contracted the imagined continent until only Antarctica remained. Real geography replacing theory. That's worth studying. An admiral in Istanbul in 1513 had better maps of South America than most Europeans. Better longitude calculations, more sophisticated projection techniques. He compiled sources from multiple civilizations, multiple cartographic traditions, Greek, Arabic, Portuguese, Spanish, Genoese. He preserved a Columbus map that otherwise vanished from history. That's the real achievement, not ancient aliens. Human networks of knowledge transmission operating across political and cultural boundaries. But their process was deduction from first principles, not observation or ancient sources. It's a case study in how theory drives exploration, just incomplete and speculative. The story of how Friesland was created, spread, and finally erased is infinitely more interesting than any ancient civilization theory. That's how cartography worked. Fill the known parts with data, fill the unknown parts with whatever seemed plausible. Antarctica has been glaciated for over 14 million years. Terra Australis, as depicted on 15 and 1600 maps, never existed. It was theoretical geography that shrank as exploration proceeded until it finally became the real Antarctica discovered in 1820. What never existed were the lands they depict in the specific ways they depict them. The difference matters. These maps show us how people understood the world before modern navigation, before satellite imaging, before scientific geography. They show imagination filling the gaps where knowledge ended. Sometimes that imagination was educated speculation, sometimes mythology, sometimes deliberate lies. But always the maps reflect their maker's worldview, their sources, their purposes. How exploration gradually replaced speculation with observation. It's a messy, human, fascinating process. No lost civilizations needed. They combined satellite observations of surface ice movement with ice flow physics to infer bedrock topography beneath, published in Nature in 2025. Resolution down to 2 to 30 kilometers for mesoscale features. the most accurate picture we've ever had of what Antarctica looks like under the ice. The Orontius Phineus continent doesn't align. The Buache map bears no resemblance. Every time technology improves and we can check these claims more carefully, the alleged matches disappear. The real Antarctic bedrock looks nothing like what these maps show, which is exactly what you'd expect if these maps depict Terra Australis speculation, misidentified South American coasts, and theoretical geography, not ancient surveys. Meanwhile, that same satellite data revealed features nobody drew on any map before the 20th century. Massive subglacial mountain ranges, vast subsurface lakes, canyon systems, volcanic activity, bedrock islands buried under ice. The true geography is stranger and more complex than anything the old cartographers imagined. And we're only now beginning to map it accurately. Not suppressed evidence, just a long, difficult process of figuring out what Earth actually looks like. Maps from the 1500s and 1600s were sophisticated for their time and wildly inaccurate by modern standards. Cartographers synthesized whatever information they could access. They filled gaps with logic and imagination. They sometimes lied for political purposes. And explorers gradually, expensively, painfully proved where the maps were wrong and corrected them. 4 centuries of incremental progress, no mystery, no lost technology, just humans slowly learning their planet's shape through trial, error, argument, and occasionally getting killed by scurvy in the Southern Ocean. The Piri Reis map's African coastline is accurate to within 50 miles. In 1513, using Portolan projection techniques. His longitude calculations work, his Caribbean detail is solid. His synthesis of sources from different cartographic traditions produces a coherent whole. Ottoman cartography in the early 1500s was astonishingly good, better than most European work of the same period. Piri Reis wasn't drawing from ancient aliens. He was drawing from the cutting edge of Islamic geographic science, Portuguese maritime charts stolen or captured in naval battles, and synthesis skills that demonstrate serious mathematical sophistication. 20 years after Columbus's first voyage, he had access to a Columbus map Europeans lost. He worked in a cosmopolitan empire that connected European, Islamic, and Asian knowledge networks. He produced arguably the most sophisticated Atlantic chart of the early 16th century. Because the Ottoman Empire in 1513 had geometric mathematics, astronomical observations, centuries of Islamic cartographic tradition, recent access to Portuguese and Spanish exploration data, and a navy that captured European pilots and their documents in Mediterranean warfare, Piri Reis himself noted he interrogated a Spanish sailor captured in 1501 who had sailed with Columbus. That sailor likely had charts. Those charts went into Piri's synthesis. That's not suppressed history, that's regular history. But it requires understanding Mediterranean politics, Ottoman naval power, Islamic geographic science, and European exploration simultaneously. Complex reality, no mystery. Purposes, or misidentified from actual known coasts, or drew from mythology, now thoroughly analyzed by mainstream scholarship, and found to depict ordinary historical geography with all its errors. 12 maps worth studying precisely because they show how geographic knowledge actually developed. Messily, politically, through competition and synthesis, and occasionally lies. Maps that tell us more about their makers than about lost civilizations. The last thing to say. When people claim mainstream historians suppress evidence, ask what evidence. The Piri Reis map sits in Topkapi Palace Museum, published online, analyzed in dozens of peer-reviewed papers. The Orontius Phineus map is in libraries, digitized, freely available. The Buache map is in the Library of Congress. These aren't suppressed, they're studied continuously. Every major claim about them has been examined and re-examined by experts in cartographic history. The conclusions are public, published, debated in academic journals. Meanwhile, scholarly refutations exist in academic journals most people never see, published in Cartographica, Imago Mundi, ISIS, The History of Cartography, detailed analyses showing why the extraordinary claims fail. But academic publications don't trend on social media. They don't get millions of views. They don't promise hidden secrets. One based on careful analysis of primary sources, understanding of cartographic history, geological evidence, and physics. The other based on what looks cool at first glance and feeds into desires for mystery, both publicly available. Both compete for attention. One requires reading dense academic papers. The other requires watching a 20-minute video with dramatic music. They're beautiful. They're historically significant. They tell us enormous amounts about how the world was understood in the 15 and 1600s. But what they don't tell us is that ancient civilizations had impossible technology, or that mainstream historians suppress evidence. What they show is exactly what cartographic historians say they show: speculation, mythology, synthesis, errors, hoaxes, and occasionally brilliant work within the constraints of 16th century knowledge. The maps document that process.